more than 20. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems that their strategy was to take, you know, a speck of dust on a pile of you know, cow poop and say, well, the speck may or may not have been there. It's still a massive amount of stuff into the record that isn't even being disputed.
So that is, you know, welcome to defense lawyer.
You should welcome Todd Blanche.
And, you know, and I really actually don't mean that pejoratively. You know, you're dealt a hand and you play it. They only have the proof of the one. And that is what defense lawyering is. I have to, and obviously it's so interesting because Michael Cohen, going into this, is a difficult witness for the prosecution because he obviously has a lot of baggage. You know, so that's clear. But I have to say, I think Susan Hoffinger, really shown on, and you can see her experience. You know, she is a very experienced defense lawyer as well as a prosecutor, and I think that helps. And I think the biggest star of the who did really well is Michael Cohen. You know, all of the sort of concern about, was he going to be volatile? Was he going to fight needlessly?
Yeah.
Maybe little pieces, but in general, I think the prosecution has to think, and I'm sure his counsel thinks, he really held up. And you know what? This is a guy who, like, of course he's there because of his own choices in life, but he has been through a lot. And you know what? Having the whole world focusing on you and the entire Trump machine focused on you as well to dig up every speck of dirt. It's going on right now as we speak.
Yeah.
You know, that's difficult. And I have to say, I was surprised.
That he held up.
Yeah. So
what I think is interesting, when I keep going back to David Kelly's interviews on this program, it's disorienting, right? Because I'm watching the way I would watch a television show, right? Trump has always succeeded in making his sordid criminal life like a TV show. And I'm thinking, wow, they really landed some blows on him. But what are the blows? That he committed crimes? He committed the same crimes Trump's on trial for.
Again, I don't say this pejoratively, is theater. And the more you can say, look at the birdie, look over here, the better. And that's why, you know, when I've been talking to you about this and you're like, well, couldn't they just focus the jury on, like, think of all the evidence you knew even before he took the stand. I'm sure that is one of the things you're going to hear. And in many ways, so much of what Michael Cohen said is corroborated, and you kind of knew what the story was before.
And the jury will decide if that was enough, right? We have no idea.
Exactly.
Vaughn, since I've been on the air, it's been 11 minutes and 7 seconds. I've been hearing that there's something dramatic happening in the courtroom because I was wrapped by your report and Andrew's analysis. I don't know what it is. Bring us inside what's unfolding.
The courtroom was momentarily just cleared here of the gathered press as well as the jury because Judge Merchan wanted to admonish Robert Costello, the current witness brought forward by the defense team for Donald Trump. He has been limited to a very narrow scope of testimony that he has been allowed to provide, and there's been several instances where he has begun to answer a question, and then ultimately there was an objection raised by the prosecution, which was sustained by Judge Merchan. But from our team inside, they're saying that Costello at one point let out a geez, and then another time let out a sigh, and another point ordered something to be struck from the record. And this led ultimately Judge Merchan to order everybody out of the courtroom. And right before, as this was happening, there were some quick words that Judge Merchan directed at Costello, telling him to not roll your eyes at me. He had suggested that he was, quote, staring him down. So it sounds like Robert Costello, who was that individual who was briefly counseling Michael Cohen for a couple months in 2018 and is testifying here that Cohen had told him that he did this all independently of Donald Trump, and he never informed Donald Trump of the Stormy Daniels payment. This is now sort of a key witness here for the defense team. But with the jury in the room, clearly Judge Merchan very peeved to the point that he asked the jury and the press to leave, and they are now just only being let back in.
Okay, so I have some of this transcript that Vaughn is just reading out to our audience. Merchan says, quote, I'd like to discuss, these are from our correspondent, our program's correspondent, Lisa Ferry, in the courtroom. I'd like to discuss proper decorum in my courtroom, Merchan says. If you don't like my ruling, you don't say geez. You don't say strike it because I'm the only one who can strike it from the record. Judge Merchan, you don't give me side eye and you don't roll your eyes. Costello, I understand. Merchan, clear the courtroom. This seems like This seems very theatrical. This seems very Trumpian. What sort of damage can it do in the eyes of the jury?
Can I just say, I have been in a situation where I have had to and gotten court permission to have a lawyer for somebody testify. Those lawyers are dispassionate and careful, and they are only going to answer questions that they legally have to answer because they have a continuing duty of loyalty to their client or sometimes former client. And and I would know in that situation that they were being completely ethical and trying to adhere to their continuing duties to their client. This is the antithesis of that from what we're seeing.
And just remind everybody who Costello is.
So Costello is somebody who Michael Cohen spoke to and had an attorney-client privileged relationship, but ultimately didn't hire. He has worked with Rudy Giuliani, and there has been evidence introduced, and this also came up in the Mueller investigation, suggesting that he and others were part of an effort to try to get Michael Cohen not to cooperate. It'll be interesting to see how much that plays out on cross. His behavior in the courtroom, let's just say it is not consonant with what I have seen with somebody thinking about their obligations to that client or prospective client, and isn't coming off as dispassionate.
Yeah, I mean, Suzanne Craig, you've watched all of this. I've read it all, which is a distant second to seeing it. I've not read Mershon this upset in every day of the trial transcript that I've read.
No, and I think what's really important about it is how much the jury reads him. You always see in these trials I've sat through, this is my third one, and the jury and the judge have a real relationship.
You know what's incredible about all of this? A couple of weeks ago, I was thinking that Alina Yaba is probably one of the worst lawyers ever. Whenever Trump puts the defense together, it's a mess. This Costello guy has just made Alina Yaba Dabba Doo look like the best legal representative ever. And the weirdest thing is, Costello at one stage was supposedly trying to represent Cohen. The guy is just after a dollar. The Trump campaign, the Trump defense must be desperate. No other word. This is just like they've just destroyed the tiny little speck they had. Michael Cohen said yes, he took some money which wasn't his, and just what a circus. What a circus.
The fact that this has escalated to this extent, this is part of why there was disagreement within the Trump world about whether they should call Bob Costello. The only reason he is being called is because the client insisted that he be called. There were people on Trump's team that thought he would be too much of a liability. And
Paula,
the fact that the judge has now reprimanded him for staring him down, this is really taking a turn.
So, that's what I was getting to that. He told Costello in a raised voice when he told the jury to leave, Mr. Costello, you're to remain seated. The jury leaves. Then Costello, after another sustained objection, Costello rolls his eyes, lets out an audible sigh, side glances the judge. The judge says, I want to discuss proper decorum in my courtroom. The judge says, you don't give me a side eye and you don't roll your eyes. The judge says, when there's a witness on the stand, if you don't like my ruling, you don't say geez, you don't say strike it. Costello holds a long glare at the judge. Judge Mershon says, are you staring me down? Then the judge says, clear the courtroom. There's yelling by security officers at the press to leave. The video is cut. Court security says nobody can come back in. Paula, you have a JD. You've been covering court cases for quite some time. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, this is unbelievable, and I know Bob Costello quite well. I've talked to him for about a decade. The fact that he would allow this to happen on the stand, it suggests in many ways that he is probably posturing for the defendant. Remember, it's the defendant that overrode his own defense attorneys. They said this is not a good idea. Do not put Costello on the stand. He overrode them because he loved Costello's performance in Congress last week, where he attacked not only Bob Costello, but also this case and the judge. So the fact that Costello would conduct himself in a trial like this, potentially jeopardize a case like this, I am actually pretty surprised, but it validates the concerns that have been expressed by members of Trump's defense team about why they did not want to call Costello, and also reminds us why when the defendant calls the shots and not the defense attorneys, you can have something like this happen.
I suspect Trump's legal spokesperson, that's her new role, has no idea what she's on about, and 2, says any old garbage just to take up time on Fox, and 3, would absolutely brick it if somebody called her bluff and put Trump on stand. So, straight question. Press the like button if you think, yes, Trump should take to the stand and give us all a laugh, because I can predict it would probably be a bit of a disaster.
As far as where this all goes next, what would be in the thought process to testify or not testify on the part of the former president?
Well, he's got to listen to his attorneys. It's not as much what he wants to do. We know he wants to testify. He is willing. He is able. He is nothing to hide at all. He's absolutely ready to tell the truth. Frankly, I think the truth is already spoken. He was in the White House while somebody in accounting booked a legal fee payment as a legal expense. It's pretty quick, and it would be a pretty short testimony as far as the questions that would need to be asked, because he had no part in this. The reality of the situation is that we have this judge, we have this court, and we have a DA who has been politically motivated since the minute he decided to run for office. Remember, this was not brought twice, not by Cy Vance and not by Bragg. The only time he decided to bring this case was after President Trump announced that he would be running for re-election. So the real question is one that would be discussed within the legal team,
and for the first time, a large group of protesters converged on the courthouse, and they tried to drown out a news conference of Trump supporters.
Federal candidate for president, and I have an amendment. It was an amendment that was made in order by the Rules Committee under Speaker Johnson.
I think the biggest frustration for the president right now is the unconstitutional gag order. He still feels frustrated by that. I know he speaks to the press, obviously, in the morning and at the end of the day. But even when he's speaking, he's limited as to what he can speak to. And that's incredibly frustrating for him. A witness could come up and say things that he knows are untrue, and he can't say anything back.
This is why I'm here, because we called it a legal expense and payment to a lawyer.
Based on that metric, how does this trial measure up?
0. I think that's the problem. It's, we can speak as right-wing media. I can speak as his spokesperson all I want. But I think this has done more good for the American people to understand just how bad it really is when you see that nobody can say what the crime is. When I walk down the street, most people ask me, Alina, can you just explain to me what he did and what they're actually charging him for? The truth is I can't, because it's misdemeanor based on something that is frankly civil, not criminal, and they're elevating it to federal because he's running for office.
Everybody's already seated, and then they rise for when the jury comes in. I wonder if you got any sense of whether they looked over to the people that were accompanying Donald Trump to the courthouse today. Any glances over at, I don't know, Alan Dershowitz and company?
You're definitely seeing, you're seeing a lot of, I would say, I noticed jurors looking out into the courtroom in general. Whether or not they were focusing on Trump's entourage is hard to tell. I will say, just as an observer in the courtroom, the entourage today is colorful, right? The Hells Angels leader is a very large man wearing a very flamboyant suit with a big dyed black pompadour and huge gaudy jewelry on very large hands. And he's sitting next to Boris Epstein, who kind of looks like his body double. And there's Alan Dershowitz, and there's other recognizable people, and there's a bunch of members of Congress and well-known lawyers, and everybody seems sort of, there is a sort of performative aspect to the way that they're behaving in court. It is very noticeable for those of us who are there observing as journalists, but I don't know if they're catching the jury's attention so much. It's a little, I mean, it's not a Star Wars bar scene, but it's a little bit of a cast of characters today.
Not to mention Bernie Carrick as well.
Listen, I think the whole thing's crazy. They're going to delay the thing for a week. I was about to literally go to the airport to fly up to New York to be in court tomorrow, thinking that tomorrow was going to be closing arguments. Now they want to delay it a week, and that's the purpose. My father's 100% right. They want to do whatever they possibly can to keep him off the campaign trail. They understand that Donald Trump on the campaign trail is a positive thing for conservatism, for Donald Trump, and a really bad thing for Joe Biden. They know they have to hide Joe Biden in a basement, and it's the opposite for Trump. So as long as they can possibly delay this, I'm surprised the prosecution's not calling random witnesses that have nothing to do with it. Just by the way, like they did with Stormy Daniels, 2 days of testimony for a documents case that was clearly just designed to hold Trump up and to try to embarrass him. The whole thing is a sham. The whole thing is ridiculous. It's falling apart before their very eyes. Again, they're hoping that in a New York court with a stacked jury, a biased judge, and a long holiday weekend where I'm sure the media will be hounding them and putting pressure on them to make sure that Trump doesn't get off as he should. That's what's going on right now, and that's what it's designed to do.